Good morning. I call this meeting of the Standing Senate Committee on Banking, Trade, and Commerce to order. Today is the committee's 8th meeting in our special study on digital currency, including the potential risks, threats, and advantages of these electronic forms of exchange. Still in the earlier learning stages of our study, the committee has received presentations from the Department of Finance, the Canada Revenue Agency, and the Bank of Canada. We have heard testimony from academics in the fields of economic and monetary history and in cryptography. The committee has also heard from the Bitcoin Strategy Group, the Bitcoin Exchange, CA Vertex, and BitAccess, the makers of the Bitcoin ATM, who gave a live demonstration and purchase of some Bitcoin using the ATM here at our committee. As I said last week in my opening remarks, in the interest of full disclosure, I would like to remind the committee that on Wednesday, April the 9th, 2014, I purchased in front of the committee and in front of the public, using the Bitcoin ATM, 0.18 Bitcoin for $100 Canadian. Today, based on information from CA Vertex obtained this morning at 10 o'clock, that 0.18 Bitcoin is now worth $125.14, an unrealized gain, if I could sell it, of $25.14. This morning we are going to hear from companies involved in payment systems. In our first session, we will hear from representatives from two companies that deal with fiat currency, namely Interac and PayPal. And in our second session, we are going to focus on payment systems for digital currency, specifically BitPay. For our first hour, I am pleased to welcome from Interac, Ms. Carolyn Huberstay, Head of External Affairs. Interac operates a national payment network that allows Canadians access to the money held in their bank accounts through 60,000 ATMs and 776,000 point-of-sale terminals across Canada. And from PayPal Canada, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Barry Murphy, Director of Government Relations for Canada and Latin America. PayPal is an international e-commerce business allowing payments and money transfers to be made through the Internet. I turn the floor over first to Ms. Huberstay, to be followed by Mr. Murphy.
Good morning, Mr.
Your
Chair.
opening
Thank
comments,
you.
the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, and good morning to you and to members of the committee. I really want to thank you for this opportunity today to appear. While we don't have direct experience in the area of virtual currencies, we certainly understand that the committee is interested in our role in the payments marketplace and our product innovations, particularly in the area of digital payments such as our mobile and online solutions. So I'm very pleased to be able to provide you with that information today, and I hope you find it informative. Interac is Canada's leading payment brand and only domestic payment brand. Our organization operates a low-cost and world-class debit system that is embraced by Canadians. Our brand is chosen an average of 12 million times daily to pay and exchange money with our various products. We securely connect people to their money at the ABM and at retailers across Canada and the U.S., and online through our web-based services. Interac Online for e-commerce purchases, and Interac e-Transfer for person-to-person online secure money transfers, which has a growing business use as an electronic check replacement solution, particularly for small businesses. In addition, Interac Flash is the secure contactless enhancement of Interac Debit, and it's in widespread use across retailers across Canada, and provides the platform for our mobile NFC proximity payments. We are also a leader in the area of fraud prevention and detection. On this note, and of particular interest of this committee for your study, mitigating fraud is critical to maintaining confidence in electronic payments. I am pleased to report that Interac debit card fraud losses reached a lowest recorded level in 2013. Fraud losses to financial institutions decreased to $29.5 million in 2013 from a high of $142 million in 2009. Only 25% of those losses, or $7.3 million, were the result of fraud exploitation within Canada. And this will continue to decline and is as we move for full point-of-sale implementation by the end of 2015. As a reminder, Interac transactions operate on a good funds model, so there are no chargebacks to merchants, and consumers are fully protected by our zero liability policies. Ultimately, debit products are about accessing people's money in their bank accounts and need to offer strong protections. Debit is our expertise. When we have control over the payments environment, our leadership in fraud prevention across our payment solutions is evident. Canadians love using our products, and getting these payment solutions accessible through mobile channels is a given. Last year, we successfully completed the first NFC mobile debit transactions in Canada and among the first globally for a domestic debit network. As you heard in testimony from RBC, the RBC Wallet, powered by RBC Secure Cloud, is enabled with Interac Flash, so RBC customers can use their RBC Wallet to make payments anywhere Interac Flash is accepted. In addition, our leading Interac eTransfer P2P solution is also widely offered through financial institutions' mobile banking platforms. We are actively working with financial institutions to support their mobile implementations and ensuring that customers will have the choice to use debit to pay with their mobile device. Ultimately, we will continue to innovate and go where there is consumer and merchant need and where it makes most sense. Canada is a highly competitive and innovative payments environment, and additional competition is constantly emerging. As you've heard, the range of non-traditional players involved in payments systems continues to expand, as do the array of business and technology models through which payment services are delivered to consumers, merchants, and small and medium-sized businesses and large. By developing the Code of Conduct for the credit and debit card industry in Canada in 2010, the government clearly recognized the need for stronger checks and balances to address the obfuscation and other tactics that had the potential to create an unhealthy competitive environment in the retail payments environment. We firmly believe that the Code and underlying public policy objectives should be maintained for payment technologies, including mobile, and should be considered a foundation for future efforts. In summary, we are focused on bringing innovations to the payment marketplace and believe that new products and enhancement should drive tangible value to end users. With this forward-looking focus, it is our view that the regulatory framework should continue to evolve to alleviate any competitive inequities and to allow for a smooth path for payments innovation. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your opening comments. Mr. Murphy.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Barry Murphy, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for PayPal in Canada. PayPal is an eBay Inc. company. eBay connects millions of buyers and sellers through the world's largest global online marketplace. And eBay enabled $205 billion in global commerce last year. PayPal was founded in 1998 to allow users to transfer money or pay securely online. PayPal has 148 million active registered accounts globally and 5.5 million here in Canada. PayPal's roots in the payment industry have always been digital and mobile. Today, PayPal is at the forefront of digital commerce by helping businesses compete and by providing people with simple, secure ways to shop, donate, or send money. $1 in every 6 spent on e-commerce globally is spent through PayPal. Allow me to describe how PayPal works. You sign up for a free PayPal account, either online or with the PayPal mobile app. You then link your bank account, credit and/or debit cards to that account. This enables you to make highly secure transactions online without sharing any of your account details. Security is the fundamental building block of PayPal's business. PayPal allows people to send money or pay for goods and services without having to expose their financial and banking information to businesses or other PayPal users. It also allows businesses to receive payments without the cost and potential liability associated with processing and securing sensitive financial information. In your physical wallet, you probably have cash, debit card, credit card, or two. Think of PayPal as your digital wallet, where you access your money from your PayPal account on your laptop or smartphone to shop online across Canada and millions of places globally. I know this committee has been looking at issues surrounding digital and virtual currencies. While PayPal is a digital payments company, it does not accept virtual currencies for payment. We do believe that Bitcoin may play an important role in payments in the future, and we're actively looking at ways to enable it within PayPal, but for now we have no plans. Online commerce is booming across Canada. 56% of Canadian internet users said they bought goods or services online last year. However, businesses in Canada are at the early stages of their online journey, as only 20% of them sell online, according to recent data. Small businesses are a critical engine of the Canadian economy. Every 5 minutes, a small business signs up to accept PayPal payments and opens their virtual doors to new consumers in Canada and around the world. There are no setup costs associated or hidden fees for a small business to start accepting payments in multiple currencies via PayPal. Our fees are transparent and published on our website. Led by mobile, the next commerce revolution is underway. 62% of Canadians have a smartphone, the third highest penetration rate in the world. Smartphones are an everyday necessity. This is changing how we shop and pay and how businesses interact with their customers. Last year, PayPal processed $27 billion in mobile payments, up from $600 million just 3 years ago. PayPal has been processing mobile payments securely since 2006, and Canadians have been using their PayPal accounts to shop for clothing, toys, and even car parts from their mobile devices. We recently teamed up with a Canadian point-of-sale company to offer an innovative new way for cafes, food trucks, and restaurants in Toronto to accept payments via PayPal. Using the PayPal mobile app, people can now pay at more than 80 cafes, restaurants in downtown Toronto. To conclude, PayPal is focused on creating simple and secure experiences so people can shop, donate, or send money anytime, anywhere, using any device of their choice. PayPal is helping Canadian businesses of all sizes take advantage of online and mobile commerce and connect with PayPal's 148 million registered accounts around the world. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your opening comments. I'm going to move to my list of questioners, starting with Senator Bellemare, to be followed by Senator Maltais.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming here this morning. My first question is one about co-beneficiaries. The question is for both of you. In a business plan, we see that people use Interac a great deal. They use PayPal as well. Are you able to compare the cost for the consumer if they use your method of payment compared to the digital currency payment? Is it more beneficial to use Interac than digital money? Is it more advantageous to use PayPal? There's a cost that the consumer has to pay somewhere down the line, I would imagine. So you must have drawn some conclusions. So I'd like you to explain what these comparisons are.
Familiar with the cost structure of the virtual currencies. I do know for our consumers, PayPal is free to use. So if there are transaction costs associated with using a virtual currency for the consumer, then obviously I think we provide a better value for the consumer in that case.
Qui paie pour le paiement?
Who pays for PayPal? Is it the seller, the retailer?
Pay the fees.
For Interac, the transactions for a consumer would be part of one's banking package. So for my example, I have a banking package and I get unlimited debits, whether that's a check, whether that's a cash withdrawal, or whether that's I'm paying at a retailer with Interac debit. I would say on the other side is that the merchants, also we are incredibly low cost option for merchants to accept payments. Our wholesale rate to the market is 0.65 of 1 penny. The then payment provider then marks that up, a Moneris or Chase Payment Tech. Average in Canada is around 5 cents, 3 to 5 cents for a merchant, depending on the size of business and the transaction. So when I talk about low cost, we're low cost for use and acceptance.
Bon, ce que je comprends, en fait, c'est ça. Il y a des coûts.
There are costs involved. Maybe they're not so visible, but they're somewhere along the line. And they're recovered in all kinds of ways. I recently read an article, and there's a quote right here from a report taken from Advancement Banking, Goldman and Sachs. I'd like you to comment. Michael Citron.
Qui dit, if I were a payment processor like PayPal or Moneris, I would be very worried about the rise of virtual currencies and how they are going to affect my business. Pouvez-vous commenter cette...
Could you comment on that article?
I'm sure there are people in our company who are watching virtual currencies very closely, both how they develop and how they may interact with our products in the future. Whether they are worried about that or not, I honestly don't know.
As I said in my opening comments, the payments marketplace is one of the most highly competitive and active, probably more than any other part of financial services today. And I think everybody is putting out a value proposition to users, those end users, and I talked about that, providing that value to the end users. And that's what we do every day, is trying to make sure that you want to be top of physical wallet or top of virtual wallet, that you want people to choose you, so you put that value proposition. And part of our big value proposition is low fraud. We're accessing people's money in their bank accounts, and they want to make sure that that's protected. That's what we drive to do, is to protect the money in their bank accounts.
J'aurais une petite autre question.
I have one other brief question, if I may. You talked about a code of conduct. Does this code apply to virtual money? Or can it apply to virtual money?
To deal with the issues that were happening in the retail payment space, I think it has been an effective tool to be able to deal with those issues. I think as you look at this area, virtual currencies, I think it would be interesting to look at it. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily applicable, but it is something to look at.
Okay. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sénateur Maltais et ensuite Massicotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two issues that require clarification. First of all, our chair is becoming more persistent with the Bitcom, and I'm sorry that I didn't purchase one of these Bitcoins as well. The other point, and my question here is for Mrs. Hubersty, the ATM, the Interac ATMs that we have in all of the banks and in many other locations, in the future, will you include a Bitcoin system in the ATMs?
Process any of the Bitcoin transactions. We have a rule framework in place. Whatever ABM that is connected to our network must follow, whether that's private label or financial institution. At this time, there are no plans. I can't predict the future, but at this time, there are no plans to.
This is a virtual currency. It's a currency for the future, we're told. Instead of having 2 or 3 different counters for doing transactions, could we not put this together and just have one counter? For anyone who wants to do a Bitcoin transaction, they could have a Bitcoin transactions counter on one side, Interac on the other. I'm not very computer literate here, but it could be useful for everyone if it was done this way.
Does is connect people to their bank accounts at financial institutions. So that's the role we play, and that's our network itself. Whether there is opportunity in the future, I think certainly the issue of virtual currencies is one, like my colleague at PayPal, I think everybody's looking at quite closely, and I think that's why certainly this study, it's very proactive on the Senate Banking Committee's part to look at the issues around it. And I think all stakeholders who are watching this are looking at their own systems, to see whether there will be an impact in the future. So I think that's a question that everybody's considering for their own systems, and certainly one that we're looking at in terms of will this play in the future. I don't have any answers for you today as to whether that will happen, but it's certainly something that we all look at.
One final question, Mr. Chair. We receive a lot of complaints from citizens who have been victimized by piracy. I've had this happen myself. There was an attempt to made on my daughter back in December, and her account was locked. And this is regrettable, especially when it happens at the grocery store. The bank calls us, of course, and they try to help out as soon as they can. But as soon as there's an attempt by some type of system, they immediately freeze our card, and they call us to say, we're sorry, but you're going to have to leave your groceries at the counter, and your Christmas is going to be a bit frugal this year. Is it the bank or you who resolves the problem?
Really, certainly your relationship is with your financial institution. So they are the contact. They contact you directly. We work in partnership with financial institutions to prevent and detect fraud. And it is a collaborative effort, and I think it's everybody's role. So we work very closely with financial institutions, law enforcement, others, to make sure that we are monitoring and detecting for fraudulent activity, to make sure that your funds are protected, and that is, if there is criminal activity going on, there's an attempt, that is prevented.
Je trouve que votre système.
Your system is impeccable because everything happens within 30 minutes of the attempt being made as soon as someone tried to get into an account, and the money was not able to be withdrawn. But I feel that your system is good, but does the same thing apply to PayPal?
Fraud very seriously, and we have significant resources in our company to detect and prevent fraud. We also work very closely with our financial institution partners. In addition to all those efforts, we also have what we call buyer protection and seller protection. So if there is a problem with a transaction, we fully back that transaction and protect the buyer or the seller, or in some cases both, and make them whole if there's a problem.
Merci, Chair.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you.
Massicott, to be followed by Senator Ringet.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're obviously two very important contributors to our payment system, and thank you for your contribution. Just to put your experience in perspective, could you tell me if you look at number of transactions in Canada, what percentage is Interac, what percentage is PayPal of the total number of transactions, and maybe what percentage cash, if you wish?
When you look at electronic payments, Interac is around 55% of all card-based transactions, and that's versus credit card combined. So that's electronic. I think where you still see cash as a heavy player is in the low-ticket space, sort of that under $20. And we start to factor that in, it's still relevant, but I think a lot of these contact technologies, and like our Interac Flash, are to move into that space to try to take market share there. If you want to speak to the PayPal and the sort of that side of things.
Sure. PayPal, I think that the percentage I gave globally of 1 in 6 electronic, e-commerce transactions are through PayPal, and I think that number probably is fairly consistent in Canada, so that puts us at about 15%. We do approximately 9 million transactions a day globally, so I would guess the number would be, if you sort of took the Canadian population and sort of did a quick math, it's probably similar to that.
So it's 15% of all Canadian electronic transactions is PayPal, 55% is Interac. Is that?
A lot of it, they're different. So PayPal's more the e-commerce side of things. If I'm speaking more at the card-based, we do have a P2P money transfer service. We also have Interac Online. So our transactions are about 12 million daily within Canada, so we're very much domestic.
Yeah.
So it's to do the pie chart and split things out. It would be a bit of comparing different methods, in different forms.
But both of you are experts. Obviously, you know your merchants very well because they're near your customer. They're the intermediary for which people use your product. And having said that, I want to pick your brain a little bit. The current code of ethics of the merchants of card-based transactions allows merchants since approximately a couple of years ago to offer discounts to customers. Both in your cases compared to, say, credit cards, you're significantly cheaper and less expensive to use, and therefore there's no questions the merchants would favor customers paying via your services than with credit cards. But it looks like the credit card market and your own, in fact, Interac, you're being challenged the last couple of years. Now, they're doing a pretty good job of capturing the marketplace. Why isn't the merchants offering part of that cost to discount to their customers to favor you and also favor themselves?
It is certainly a conversation that we're having with the merchant community. It's an active conversation. You point out that the Code of Conduct provides for a provision to allow for merchants to discount, paying with Interac debit. What we tend to see is that smaller merchants do it. We're working with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and they're doing an active outreach to the small business community to talk about those choices that they have and to be able to offer that discount. So as you point out, there's a benefit to them for a customer pulling out Interac versus their premium credit card. So I think that that is something that will continue to increase, but it's certainly an active conversation that we're having with merchants to educate them about that ability.
But I don't see it anywhere. I don't know of any merchants offering that discount.
I live in the beaches area of Toronto, and I see a lot in my local community. I see merchants, particularly small restaurants, that are accepting Interac in cash. They don't actually accept credit card payments because they can't afford the cost. I see others offering a discount if it's cash or Interac. So I think this will be, the code's been out since mid-2010. I know it's sort of 4 years later, but I think this is a matter of educating. And it's an active, I said it's an active role we're playing in educating the merchant community about that opportunity.
Senator, if I may, the PayPal relationship with the merchant is slightly different in the sense that we offer very transparent flat rate pricing. It's available on our website. For the merchant knows exactly what they're going to pay for the transactions they process using PayPal. They also, it does not matter to the merchant what funding source you use within your PayPal wallet to pay that. So if you're funding it with a very expensive credit card, the merchant is still paying the flat fee. So it's a slightly different relationship that we have with the merchants. We say we're charging you this percentage. That's it.
Mm-hmm. While we got Interac here, if I don't mind, a couple of years ago, from my knowledge, that even the Interac business, the debit card flat fee, was being challenged by some new entrants to the marketplace whereby Visa, MasterCard were also introducing their debit cards, but not on a flat fee basis or not as cheap as yours. How are they doing compared to yours? What are they capturing a greater share of the marketplace? Does the consumer know the difference and so on?
Certainly we have a multi-debit network now in Canada. I think our biggest competition right now is credit. Canadian consumers tend not to make a big differentiation between credit and debit. They're putting their coffee and their sandwich on a credit card, equally as pulling out Interac. So that right now is our more imminent competitive threat. We are still low cost. So if I compare a bag of groceries at your local grocery store, they probably pay around 3 to 4 cents for a $100 bag of from paying with Interac, and that's whether it's $100, $200, $300. For a competitive sort of Visa debit, it would be around 40 cents, and then up $200 bag, 80 cents, and a basic credit card would be at minimum $1.50. Then you add premium on top of that, and that escalates as the bag of groceries escalates. But for us, we're still flat fee, and we still offer that value proposition to merchants, and that is our strategic approach.
So the Visa, MasterCard debit cards is nearly 10 on that example.
It's more expensive.
10 times yours, and the credit card is actually 10 times their own debit card.
Yeah.
And yet there's no differentiation in the merchants not yelling for help, not.
Well, right now the way the Code of Conduct came in is that Provision 6 said that you can't have competitive offerings on the same card going after the same transaction type. So the strategy was that basically they would ride our ubiquitous acceptance for a period of time, then we get kicked off the card once all merchants accepted. Right now the code prohibits competitive networks from competing for the same transaction type. So you do see co-badge cards today. It has Visa Debit and Interac. Interac is for point of sale domestically. The Visa Debit's for online, for international point of sale debit, and for e-commerce.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Massicotte. Senator Ringett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. I guess my question will start with Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, Am I correct in assuming that PayPal is not part of the Canadian payment system regulation?
That is correct.
So PayPal is not regulated in Canada in comparison to Interact and so forth.
That is correct.
What would be your fraud file? Would you have a fraud file? Are you susceptible to fraud? You said that you would, earlier you said that you would compensate both the customer and the merchant in such a case. So what is your fraud risk?
We have significant resources that at the corporate level that we apply to all our transactions globally to reduce the rate of fraud. I do not know exactly what our fraud percentage is, but I know it's extremely low. And in addition to that, as I said, we have the buyer and seller protections that we believe protect the consumers and the merchants in the transaction.
Okay, so I understand, like the PayPal process. When the consumer puts an amount of money into a PayPal account and uses that to pay for merchandise. So like you're a facilitator, should I say, in a process. But like,
and in addition to our own fraud controls, so the example you said is someone put money in a PayPal account. That's one way that people can fund a transaction through PayPal.
yes.
Many fund it through a direct connection with their bank account. Many fund it directly with a credit card. So in addition to our fraud controls, you also have our financial partners who are also very involved in these transactions.
Okay. From the merchant perspective in that scenario, the merchant would have to pay the rate of a non-present consumer.
The merchant pays the flat rate that we provide, that we charge the merchant, regardless of how the individual customer funds the transaction. In a transaction
So
where
who assumes the credit card cost? The
We do.
merchant. You assume the credit
Yes.
card,
In-
merchant credit card cost.
in that case we are paying the interchange fee
Okay.
if it's funded by a credit card.
Yes, I understand that. Now, so let's say, for instance, at a rate of 3% credit card merchant fees, what would be your pass-on rate to a merchant?
Our rates are on our website. Our standard rate is 2.9% plus 30 cents. So in that case, it's essentially 3.2%. We'd probably be losing some money in the transaction.
Interesting. I guess that initially, yes, I'm very much interested in the entire credit card scenarios. But initially, we're having this meeting to discuss the issue of Bitcoin and bit payment. Which one of you would be more susceptible in the near future to accept a transaction with Bitcoins?
Right now, our model is, again, right into the bank account of a consumer. So our model today does not see an association with the Bitcoin or the virtual currency.
So in
piece.
order for Interact to enable Bitcoin payments, your bank would have to accept a Bitcoin account.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Mr. Murphy.
And that would be similar for a PayPal account as well, is that we would have to decide to allow Bitcoin as a payment mechanism within the PayPal wallet. And we have no plans to do that at this time. We're watching it very carefully, looking at all the issues surrounding security, surrounding fraud, surrounding transparency. But at this time, we have no plans to implement it in the PayPal wallet.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ringhead. Senator Tkachuk.
Just a couple questions, because we are here looking at digital currency. A digital currency like Bitcoin, would it not require, to be useful, would it not require organizations like yourself to be used? In other words, how could Bitcoin be used without you?
I think the simple answer right now is the volume of transactions that are occurring with Bitcoin now are essentially a peer-to-peer transaction separate from the traditional financial payment mechanisms that we represent and others represent. It really is, I want to pay you with Bitcoin, therefore, I buy Bitcoins, I send them to you. I'm not an expert. I don't know how that transaction works or what the charges are or fees are, but it right now it's completely separate from the traditional financial payment networks, and for it to come into our networks, we'd have to be the ones who chose to do so.
So Bitcoin actually is sort of like a foreign currency in a sense that to get universal access of that cash that's represented in the Bitcoin or the value that's represented in the Bitcoin, for instance, if you want to go buy a shirt downtown, you can't use that Bitcoin if it's only got minimal use by retailers. So you have to, sooner or later, that Bitcoin has to be exchanged for the currency of the marketplace that you're in, whether it's US dollars, Canadian dollars, euros. So if we see it that way, then your Bitcoin would have to become part of the regular sort of financial marketplace before it could be useful on a universal basis. That's what I'm trying to get at, I would guess.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure, but I think I'm getting it, so I'm good.
Thank you, Senator Tkachuk. That concludes round one. I'm going to move to round two, where we have Senator Massicotte.
Just to further to what Senator Tkachuk said, his words are complicated, but what you're really saying is that the reason you don't get into the Bitcoin is because it's not a very dominant or very voluminous, it's not used very much, still a marginal player, very, very marginal player. Is that the case?
I think that's accurate, and I think there's a question of what added value it provides. We're looking at things from what provides the best value and security for our consumers, and we're still looking.
Yeah. And the second point I had, just to make sure everybody understands how you answer Senator Rangette's question. She noted and you agreed that you're not part of the Canadian payment system. To some people who are maybe listening, that would maybe connotate a negative, a level of risk. But you may want to clarify, does that signify that you're less acceptable and you have no regulations affecting you? And are you therefore a player of higher risk for those who want to use your services?
No, I don't believe so. Because of the amount of resources and energy we put into fraud prevention and security, because of the fact that we are tied into financial institutions all over the globe, in Canada and elsewhere, where our customers fund their accounts using credit cards or debit cards or bank accounts. We have the additional there's the connections into the members of the Canadian Payments Association and the regulated entities, and then we are sort of in the middle and managing the transactions. And the additional piece that I think is very important to understand is that as PayPal, when you are paying using PayPal to either buy, send money to someone or to buy a product or service online, we see both sides of the transaction. So we know who the payer is and we know who the merchant is. So we have the ability to much more transparency in that system than might otherwise exist.
In fact, in that sense, you are the bank account. You're actually doing a cross change of payments.
I wouldn't say that. But
But
we
in function, you are.
but we do manage the flow between one entity and the other, and we see both sides of the transaction, and that provides a greater deal of security, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Bellemare.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I, too, am going to ask you a question that's more an affirmation than a question, and I'd like your comment. We've heard a lot of people talk to us about the Bitcoin. A lot of people have spoken to us about the payment system. Digital currency claims that it is eliminating the middlemen. But in listening to you, what I have gleaned is that digital currency is competing, is a scary competitor, because you're a middleman, an intermediary, and they are claiming that they're doing away with the middleman or intermediary because it's peer-to-peer. So if I understand correctly, you're competing with Bitcoin, and in your business model, what you can claim as opposed to Bitcoin is security. Bitcoin, as we've seen, there can be instances of fraud. Is my statement correct?
Statement is correct. I think that we provide a level of security and a level of transparency into the transaction that, and as I said it up front, I'm not an expert in Bitcoin. I don't know the transaction flows. I don't know the costs associated with each step along the transaction. But I think in addition to security and transparency, we also can provide great benefit to the consumer and the merchant.
Peut-être juste pour votre information,
Just for your information, Bitcoin experts told us that their method of payment was among the most transparent because you could always see who purchased what and who was receiving what in their computer code. So that they say that they also have a great deal of transparency. I can't tell you whether it's more or less than what you provide, but it's not as opaque as some would think. It's always possible to determine who has been involved in the transaction. But I simply wanted to understand this because the Bitcoin business plan is that they're coming out and saying we're just transforming methods of payment dramatically because we're eliminating the middleman from the system which is linked to the banking system.
I've been in financial services for decades now. I will date myself. Payments is probably one of the most hotly contested, competitive areas of financial services today. We're looking at all sorts of new players in wanting a piece. Google, Facebook, virtual. It's dynamic, and you're looking at your business model, and you're saying, what value do we bring to our users? For us, we are direct into your bank account. You can't be more transparent. Everything's online, real-time payments. You see everything documented. Our value proposition is one of low cost, but one of the ones we hold dear, whether it's Interac e-Transfer, Interac Online, our debit products, is security. We build products for the Canadian marketplace. We know Canadians want secure access to funds. They don't want to have to worry about whether there's money when their mortgage payment is hitting their account. These are important value props. We invest a lot in technology, a lot with our partners to do our utmost. And seeing that fraud number come down year over year on the Interac debit, or the debit card side is, we're not done yet. We're not resting on our laurels. We want to continue to drive criminals out of the Canadian marketplace when it comes to payments. We don't want them using our network and affecting the clients that are using our services. That is a number one value prop we bring.
Merci.
Thank you. Senator Rinette.
Thank you, Chair. More question for Mr. Murphy. Your data processing equipment resides where? In Canada, in the U.S.? Where is it?
Predominantly in the U.S.
Predominantly in the U.S. So therefore, all transaction, just like Visa and MasterCard, all transaction within the PayPal system from a Canadian, all that information, that processing is in the U.S.
I believe that's so.
And is not subject to the Privacy Act in Canada.
I'm not certain about that. I can get you an answer on that. I know that we take privacy very seriously and work very closely with the Privacy Commissioner and others to make sure that we are meeting the needs of Canadians.
And bear in mind, this is your first appearance before this committee, and we have so much interest into the issues of payment entities such as yours. So I have for instance, since you are not part of the Canada payment system, this committee has also looked a few years ago into the money laundering aspect and all the current regulations that we have in regards to money laundering and reporting to FinTrack and so forth. Are you subject to that regulation?
We are subject to money laundering regulations throughout the globe, not here in Canada.
Not here in Canada. Well, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Just to make sure on the last answer, you're saying you're not subject to Canadian legislation relative to money laundering and so on. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So therefore, if somebody comes in and deposits $10,000, $15,000 in cash into a PayPal account in Canada, you have no obligation to report that to FinTrack to define its source?
I don't know if we have an obligation to report that to FinTrack. I know that our anti-fraud and anti-money laundering provisions that we institute globally would certainly kick in on that, and we would take additional steps. So
let's say Canadian deposits $15,000 in your PayPal account, and you're saying your corporate would respond, and he would report that to whom? To U.S. authorities or Canadian authorities, or?
I don't know the specific answer. I can get you the answer to that.
Okay.
I know that it would not go undetected. I assure you of that, and it would not be something that would just simply happen.
Can you deposit directly into a PayPal account without going through a bank account in Canada?
No.
So can you put in excess of $10,000, to ask Senator Massicott's question, directly into a PayPal account without it having come from a bank?
Unless you can do it from a credit card, I believe no.
So I can't send an envelope with $15,000 to deposit my PayPal account?
Certainly not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's the question I was going to ask. When he asked that, so that's very good.
Thank you, Senator Chikachuk. I didn't mean to take your question.
No, that's fine. As long as I got answered.
Mr. Murphy, you indicate PayPal has been around for 15, 16 years. You go back 17 years, you did nothing. Today you're doing $205 billion. Interac, I'm not sure how long you've been around. How long has Interac been?
30 years this
30
year.
years, okay. Bitcoin, as I recall, was somewhere in the area of 2009, so we're talking roughly 5 years. And my recollection is it's suggested there's somewhere in the area of 12.5 million Bitcoins in circulation at the present time. Sitting where you are from your perspective, I'd like to ask you to sort of take a look at your own crystal ball, and what do you see in the next 5 years? How do you see the landscape? You touched on this briefly, Ms. Huberstee, that you're always under attack and there's which way it may go, but what do you see?
Certainly, the next avenue is definitely mobile.
Mobile.
Mobilization of payments, using your mobile device to make payments, being able to walk through a drugstore and just barcode and you're tallying things up and make a payment and out you go. You may not even go through a cashier. I think that, interestingly enough, if you go even step back 3 years ago, I think people would have predicted mobile payments would be more present than they are today. I think it's been not a revolution, but it's an evolution in how payments are changing. So I think I go back to the point about it is an exciting time in payments. I think it's very difficult to predict 5 years out. I would say, though, that if there is a sure bet, the mobilization of payments is certainly a place that it's going. It's certainly when we've been talking to the Department of Finance and the Code of Conduct, the need to mobilize the code, make it applicable to mobile payments has been a priority. And certainly the government is taking that step. So I think if there's a bet, that would be a first step.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy?
I would agree with that. I think that and even the mobile payments industry is changing rapidly. There are new competitors entering every day. There are companies down in Silicon Valley, some of whom are staffed with our former employees who, have received significant amounts of funding and have not released a product yet. So it's an exciting time to be in the payments industry. I think that, we're going to continue to do what we do well and watch the competitors. And you mentioned, 12.5 million Bitcoins or so in circulation at this point. That's fairly significant. I think it pales in comparison to the numbers that you were hearing from Caroline and myself as far as what processes through our systems. But it's an exciting time, and there will be significant additional change over the course of the next several years.
I would add this one thing, that there's a lot of, I was sort of this machination of things happening in the middle, but I point out in my opening comments, the need to take in consideration the end users. What's the value to them? For a consumer, what's the value for me to move into something else? I have my card or something else, or it works well. And part of that is about, we see the value, one of the value propositions is privacy of information, security of my funds. For the merchant community, that it's a value. I'm not going to pay a higher cost if it's of no value. Where's the other value attached to making sure that I get my funds and I get to sell my goods? Am I going to sell more goods if I'm in another area? Might be a value to me. So I think it is really looking at those end pieces to say, is it a value?
Thank you. Senator Tkachuk.
Follow up on that. On the mobile phone. Do mobile phones store information? Do they store the information when you use mobile phones to make payments?
There are different models, but certainly the security of the information, you would have certain credentials that are secured within either the secure element within the phone or secure element within a cloud. But those are all encrypted and highly secure.
Okay.
In our case, the transactions occur in the cloud, if you will, so there's no data that's stored on the phone.
There's no data stored on the phone, no. So 'cause I would say, you lost your phone, you wouldn't want a lot of stuff in there, I would think.
Well, it's interesting. I've said that you probably know that you've lost your phone before you've lost your wallet these days.
Yeah,
and it's certainly easier to turn off a phone than it is to.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
To our panel, on behalf of the committee, thank you very much for appearing before us. You've been very helpful in our deliberations. We will suspend, colleagues, until 11:30, when we will reconvene. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier today in our second hour, we have a representative from BitPay, which is an electronic payment processing system for the Bitcoin currency. It enables online merchants to accept Bitcoins as a form of payment. Today, we welcome by video conference from Atlanta, Mr. Tim Bian, Chief Compliance Officer of BitPay. With 21 years of experience as a risk officer, Mr. Bian has worked at Visa, the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is the American equivalent of CDIC, and as Vice President Credit Administration for the Asahi Bank, LT. Mr. Bian, we're delighted to have you with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, distinguished members of the committee, for the opportunity. Yes.
Continue, sir.
Okay, thank you, distinguished members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Tim Bian, Chief Compliance Officer of BitPay, a merchant processor that is headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. I appreciate your interest and studying of the use of digital currencies. Since Bitcoin represents the dominant share of digital currencies, my testimony will focus on Bitcoin specifically, and not on any of the alternative digital currencies. I will also spend a few minutes to discuss BitPay, as we are a leader in enabling merchants to accept Bitcoins as payments. BitPay was started in May 2011 by co-founders Tony Gillespie and Stephen Pear, who both still lead our startup company today. Over the past 3 years, BitPay has acquired over 30,000 merchants to accept Bitcoins. Our merchants include many small and medium-sized businesses who accept Bitcoin, often side by side with credit cards and other forms of payment. Our role in the Bitcoin ecosystem is very close to that of the traditional merchant acquirers in the credit card space. We act as an agent of the payee to help merchants clear and settle transactions over the Bitcoin network. Merchants could accept Bitcoin directly, but automating this is very difficult and complex, and therefore merchants choose us, including our software and services. To fight money laundering and terrorist financing, BitPay has a strict Know Your Customer policy to verify all of our merchants' applications. We need to know who our merchants are and what they are selling. We only want the good merchants using our service, and therefore we conduct additional due diligence and at times suspend and terminate those who violate our terms of use, a copy which was shared today as an exhibit. Our strict policies to comply with laws and protect our brand have earned BitPay the reputation as a leader and well-respected company in the payment space. While BitPay is a merchant processor, for clarity, BitPay is not a money service business. BitPay is not a Bitcoin wallet provider, nor serves as a Bitcoin exchange. We do not offer any Bitcoin services for consumers. Consumers pay merchants from a Bitcoin wallet that they have chosen for themselves. Even though we deal with Bitcoins, our business model of merchant processing or merchant acquiring, as it is typically called in the credit card industry, is fairly traditional. Merchant acquiring began in the 1950s with credit cards and the big marketing push to get businesses to accept credit cards as payments. Over the years, companies such as First Data, TSYS, Fiserv, and others would emerge with new tools to better service merchants. These companies are typically not household names. They provide and operate behind the scenes, facilitating merchant payment acceptance as a business-to-business service. Most consumers, even when making a payment through one of these service providers, don't even know that these companies exist. Fast forward 40 years to the 1990s with the launch of the World Wide Web and the first web browser. Businesses could now build a website to reach consumers, but how could they take a payment from a web page? It was the mail order companies who first figured this out. If they could accept a credit card payment over the phone, then perhaps they could also accept a credit card over the internet. Companies like CyberSource and Authorize.net built payment gateways for processing credit cards over the internet. And today, 20-some years later, credit cards are still the most widely accepted used form of payment over the internet. However, credit cards were never designed for the internet and therefore have some significant vulnerabilities as a payment source. For example, last year over 12 million people became victims of identity theft, mostly from shopping online. Businesses lose over $20 billion per year due to payment fraud. The acquiring and issuing banks don't take full responsibility for the fraud and often pass on the losses to merchants. If you are a business owner, it is often your loss when accepting a stolen credit card, even if the bank approved it. Credit card fees are significant to merchants, with the highest fees paid by the smallest mom-and-pop businesses and the lowest income consumers. Bitcoin is a cheaper, faster, and more secure payment system. There are major differences between credit cards and Bitcoins. Credit cards are pull transactions. The shopper provides their account number and secret credentials that the business can use to pull money from their account. The problem is that the same credentials to pull one-time legitimate use can be used to pull money many more times by that same business or by anyone who has these credentials. This is the fundamental design problem with credit cards, and it is the root cause of the identity theft and fraud that we see today. Think about that for a minute. Why would you give someone full access to your, say, $20,000 line of credit to pay them just $20? In 2009, Bitcoin was invented as an open standard, open protocol, and an open source payment network, basically free to everybody. Bitcoin takes everything we know about the internet, security, and cryptography, and builds a payment system designed for the internet. Nobody, no one person, nobody owns the network, nobody controls the network. All of the users collectively own the network, its rules, and its ledger. Anyone can use Bitcoin or build an application on top of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is much like the internet itself, where anyone can use the internet and build an application on top of the internet. Bitcoin payments are push transactions. If I want to pay someone, I push them the exact amount I want to give them. The recipient does not have my account number, they do not have my secret credentials, and they do not get any permission to pull money from my account. Only I can push out the payment. Bitcoin works similar to email and text messages as an example. You cannot pull an email or text message from me. I can only push the message to you. Bitcoin works the same way for payments. For consumers, Bitcoin is another choice of payment, simply. One of the main reasons why a consumer would choose to pay with Bitcoin is that Bitcoin can reduce, if not completely eliminate, the risk of the consumer becoming a victim of identity theft. Identity theft happens when a criminal gets access to the victim's account number and credit card credentials and uses those credentials to make unauthorized purchases. When using Bitcoin, the consumer never provides their identity to make a payment, so there is no identity information to steal and no risk of identity theft. Bitcoin is a massive win for consumers, saving 12 million people per year the expense and hassle of dealing with the fallout of identity theft. For businesses, Bitcoin can also stop the 20 billion per year fraud problem. When your business receives a Bitcoin payment, it's confirmed, it's yours. It cannot be reversed or taken away from you. Businesses can now reach customers in emerging markets where they could reasonably collect payments from before. It is the small mom and pop businesses that are most excited about Bitcoin and represent the adoption today. The businesses who accept Bitcoin are now opening up to new markets and creating jobs. Bitcoin does, however, have limitations that will keep it a small player in the payment space for some quite time. Compared to credit card, Visa, as an example, can handle 20,000 transactions or more per second worldwide. Bitcoin can handle 7. Not 7,000, but 7 transactions per second. Today, the average rate on the Bitcoin network is 1 transaction per second. So compared to the collective networks of credit cards, debit cards, payment cards, ACH, and wires, there are 50,000 times more transactions taking place on traditional networks than on the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin also has some limitations on its usability. The global money supply of Bitcoin is worth around $8 billion. Compare this with the global M2 money supply of about $70 trillion. There is 8,000 times more money in the world in traditional currencies than in Bitcoin. Even though it's small, Bitcoin has invented something previously thought to be impossible. Many times when parties transfer assets to each other, they are trading a digital representation of an asset, like a stock certificate. The asset itself settles 1 to 3 days later. With Bitcoin, it is now possible to transfer an asset remotely and immediately settle the transaction with no counterparty risk. That type of instrument has never existed before. The possibility of this instant worldwide settlement are very interesting. And this is where the real potential for Bitcoin exists. The Bitcoin blockchain, which is the public accounting ledger of Bitcoin, is largely a property database, if I could use that example. It can handle quadrillions of individual asset accounts with the full chain of custody every time an asset is transferred from one party to another. This may sound exciting, but it's also, Bitcoin is a disruptive technology. Bitcoin will not replace the Canadian or US dollar or the euro or gold, but it could disrupt existing financial services and their fee structures. Today, banks, as an example, charge many fees to consumers and merchants, such as overdraft fees, maintenance fees, authorization fees, processing fees, ATM fees, late fees, and even fees to send your paper statement in the mail. With Bitcoin, users are empowered and can handle many of their daily payments needs for themselves and avoid such fees. Bitcoin could also offer immediate cost reductions and technological advancements to our financial institutions and community, particularly in the areas of interbank settlement, international transfers, and foreign exchange. The current 1 to 3 day settlement times that I illustrated on many types of transactions can be reduced to 1 to 3 seconds. Bitcoin is a technology with tremendous cost savings for businesses and consumers and is a more secure, faster, and more affordable option for transferring funds as a payment system. In conclusion, today Bitcoin is in its infancy. It is much like the internet in the early 1990s. Thanks to prior governmental leadership, the internet was allowed to evolve and develop, and today it has greatly improved our lives. If we look 10 to 20 years in the future, we will see many companies built upon Bitcoin-related technology. The original application of the internet was commerce, with companies like Amazon and PayPal that you just heard from. Over time, new and improved applications for the internet emerged. Search, social, media, and big data are all powerful industries and values built upon the internet. And where would all of these free applications like social media be today if the early internet was overly regulated, thereby inhibiting innovation? I commend the committee for studying the use of digital currencies and the potential applications of this technology. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I welcome any questions.
Mr. Bion, thank you very much for your opening statement. I'd like to go back just to your almost opening paragraph, and you refer to the fact that BitPay has 30,000 merchants at the present time. Could you give some indication to the committee, so to speak, characterize the merchants or profile? What does the portfolio look like?
Many of our merchants are small mom and pop businesses, but as you may have seen in the press releases in the Bitcoin ecosystem, there are slowly more and more traditional companies coming into play. Most recently, yesterday, Expedia has announced that they will accept Bitcoins. Specific to the Canadian market, as an example, SCPC A of British Columbia accepts Bitcoins to purchase merchandises. Another example is Tiger Direct, an electronic store that accepts Bitcoins for electronic equipment.
Thank you very much. Senator Belmar.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Can you hear the simultaneous interpretation?
Okay.
I can't see you, but I hear you
Okay,
perfectly.
parfaitement. Bon.
Great. I have a few quick questions. My first question is technical. You said that companies have lost $20 billion per year because of fraud. I wanted to know, is that globally or is that in the United States?
And that was also last year. Unfortunately, this year we had a huge breach, as you know, with the Target stores, and therefore I suspect that that number will only increase.
Maintenant, je voudrais parler.
I'd like to talk to you about your business model, about your company. You said that you are helping the merchants use this new digital currency technology. How does it work exactly with your technology? How much does it cost to the merchant? And is it compatible? Is your business plan compatible with Bitcoin credit cards, or is it something completely incompatible with the traditional methods of payments? In other words, you're specializing in virtual currency, and it doesn't make sense to provide more traditional services at the same time. That's my question. And I have another one as well with respect to identity theft.
Which has many parts. First of all, I do not believe there is a Bitcoin credit card in existence today. I wish there was in the future, but that is not available in my opinion. But more importantly, the core of your question is, what is the business model? How do we charge? And I'm glad to share, and it's available transparent on our bitpay.com webpage, that we have some very, very reasonable plans. Starting with the first plan that costs $0 but 1% of transaction fees. But more importantly, we have other plans that start at $30 a month. And the next tier of services starting at $300 a month, fixed rate. And therefore, if you have many transactions, obviously the $30 or $300 a month payment plan is the much more reasonable cost justification. So I hope you can see that these are very nominal costs, and perhaps it's because we want to share the innovation of Bitcoin and the value proposition that we are providing. And so we really want to motivate merchants to investigate also for themselves what Bitcoin and BitPay can do for them, because we feel that it is very, very cost efficient for them.
Donc, ce que vous dites, c'est que...
So what you're saying is that the costs to the merchant are not connected to the volume of business done. So the more the merchant uses Bitcoin, the more profitable it is for the merchant.
if I may spend a little more seconds to describe exactly the cost impact to merchants. As you know, merchants pay off the top interchange of roughly 3%. They also incur the fraudulent costs and chargebacks, which may run from 1% to as high as 10% for some of these online merchants. With Bitcoin and with BitPay, we reduce that basically to the nominal cost of $30 per month fixed rate or $300 fixed rate, or if they do not want to go with a monthly plan, $0 but 1% of transactions. I think that's very compelling.
J'ai une autre question.
I have another question with respect to identity theft. You said that Bitcoin does not allow for ID theft. It's very difficult to get the data. You can't really get personal identifiers. So in order to defraud the consumer, this lack of transparency, if you like, perhaps not the right word that I'm using, but this security of identification, how is that compatible with the fact that here in the Senate we've heard a lot of experts say that the use of Bitcoin was very transparent and that we could follow the evolution of the transactions and even identify the partners involved in a particular transaction. So could you reconcile these two facts for me?
That is a great question. When people talk about the transparency of Bitcoin transactions, what they are primarily referring to is the full transparency of the general ledger. Every transaction that takes place is recorded on the general ledger. But the real crux of that benefit is to ensure that bona fide or validated transactions exist and that there are no double spend of Bitcoins. So that is more of a validation system, and the general ledger is open and refreshed with every validated transaction. However, in terms of privacy, when I send a Bitcoin payment to you, I personally have a personal key and a private key. And I need to know your personal key, which is like your address to send the Bitcoin to. And I need my private key to send my Bitcoin to you, to your public address. So that private key is never shared with anyone, and obviously is not recorded on the ledger. Only the public keys. And therefore, there is full transparency of how much my public address has sent to your public address. So that is fully available and transparent.
Merci beaucoup. Merci pour.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your enthusiasm. You really provide a good explanation. Thank you.
To be followed by Senator Tkachuk.
What concerns me most about Bitcoin is the plight of governments that are going to have to collect taxes from individuals, and what about the accounting side of all these transactions? You say that that the transactions number isn't very high, but it's not really, Bitcoin is not viewed as money, and it's not always the same thing. So sometimes it can be worth 200 times what it initially was worth. So do you have any tax concerns?
Or the clarification that the U.S. has received from the Internal Revenue Service is that Bitcoin is classified as a property, and therefore merchants should record Bitcoin payments just as they have received payments as credit card payments or cash payments, and they must pay income taxes on that. So that is clear. And so I believe there will be more clarifications of such by various countries. Regarding the accounting side, it is the duty of all of us as consumers or merchants to take care of our accounting responsibilities. We must account for, as businesses, how much income are we taking in or sales that we are generating, whether it's through Bitcoins, credit cards, or cash.
With respect to the currencies in each country, there's never any 200% increase from one month to the next. So we saw in the oil sector some huge increases and then some huge drops. So you're suggesting that changes in the value of Bitcoin is very significant. And when I talk about the tax system and the accounting system, how do you see this playing out?
I believe many of the Bitcoin ecosystem service providers, such as BitPay, provides back-end systems to help merchants and consumers account for their Bitcoins. Whether it's a personal wallet and whether it's individuals or institutions trading in Bitcoins to record gains and losses, whether it's merchants accepting Bitcoins, whether in January with a conversion equivalent to $1 of X, or in July with a conversion of X. Yes, Bitcoin market value is volatile. I think everyone would agree with that. With the hope of additional adoption and more familiarity, perhaps the volatility will reduce. However, I think we all live in a risky world, right? Yen goes up and down. U.S. dollars go up and down. The Brazil reals goes significantly up and down this past year. And so that is part of the volatility that has been experienced in Bitcoin, but we can account for that. And I believe even consumers and merchants can account for that.
Thank you.
Sénateur Kachuk, est-ce que votre entreprise
Or does it operate like Interac? How does my payment? How do you get my payment? How do you get my payment from me as a Bitcoin holder to a car dealer or a retail merchant that I've made a purchase on?
Similar to Canadian dollars being held at RBC with a bank account, you as a consumer must have a wallet, or you must have like a Bitcoin bank account, if I could use those words liberally. And therefore, there are service providers such as Coinbase, Zappo, and many, many others that are providing the service of like a Bitcoin bank. But keep in mind that these are service providers, and therefore you are entrusting them to hold your Bitcoins, which then you could use to spend.
Is there a lot of, and I'm asking this because I'm a small businessman and I'm receiving Bitcoins. That doesn't mean that my suppliers use Bitcoins, or maybe only half of them or 75% of them. Is there a lot of liquidity in the Bitcoin market so that I can take that Bitcoin and turn it into usable cash to pay my suppliers? And is there a significant transaction fee for that?
So that is the value proposition of BitPay. We take that headache away from the merchants so that they do not need to go out and liquidate their own Bitcoins, but we will help them find that liquidation so that if they choose to, they could get 100% of their sales proceeds in their fiat currency, or a mixture, a proportion, whether it's 90-10, 80-20. And so we help the merchants receive what they want. In terms of if it's difficult, that's why you see many, many service providers popping up in the Bitcoin space to help consumers as well as merchants manage their Bitcoins.
Then, when I decide to use your services to accept Bitcoins for payment, I can say to you, I want it only in Canadian currency. That's how I want the final payment. Or I can say I want it only in Bitcoins.
Absolutely. Now, you just touched upon your suppliers. So let's say you are a merchant that operates a restaurant, and you have suppliers that provide napkins, food, equipment. If any of them would like to receive Bitcoins as payments, then you could use your Bitcoins to pay them. But as you mentioned, unfortunately, the ubiquitous acceptance is nowhere close at this time. And therefore, merchants have requested a conversion into fiat currency so that they could use their Canadian dollars to pay their vendors and their employees and their suppliers.
If I just one more question, this is on the tax end. You mentioned that in the United States, a Bitcoin is considered property. So if I receive a Bitcoin payment, and I have, and let's use one Bitcoin for $100, for example, just as an example. So I've got $100 worth of property. So, but I leave that $100 in my Bitcoin account, and the transaction that I just finished was based on one Bitcoin, $100. But at the end of the year, that Bitcoin's worth $200. So, what is my do I pay tax on the extra money as capital gain on that property because it hasn't yet been converted to U.S. dollars? It's just sitting there valued at $200 rather than $100. I know I'm getting advice. I should be paying you maybe, eh? But nonetheless, it's for us to understand this, we got to know this stuff. Please.
Right. So that's where the definition and clarification of the IRS was clear. They've made a judgment and clarification that it is indeed property. While I'm not a CPA, I will best address your question. If you had a Bitcoin that was worth $100 and you received it January 1st, later in the year, December 1st, you made a purchase for a electronic good and it was worth $200, but you used that one Bitcoin because it appreciated to $200. In my non-CPA expert opinion, you would have a short-term gain of $100 because that Bitcoin has appreciated it and you've used that to consume goods worth $200 in fair value. And therefore, you would, in essence, have a short-term gain of $100.
Be a capital gain?
Via capital gain.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Bion, if I could just walk through in a very simplistic way. You have a merchant that has signed up with you, and they have a commodity which I am interested in buying, and they are listing that item at $50 US. And I decide that I'd like to purchase that $50 item, and I have sufficient Bitcoin in my wallet that I know that whatever the value is, it's in excess of $50. As a matter of fact, on one exchange this morning, it's $125. Could you walk me through how I complete this transaction? Am I getting in touch with you, or do I call the merchant?
It's excellent question, and thank you for this opportunity, because it is so seamless. So you go to your favorite merchant online. You click on the item that you want, a $50 fancy cup set. And the merchant will just simply show the price in the fiat currency, 50 Canadian dollars. You click on it, and it's the checkout process that BitPay provides its real valuable service. If you say, I want to pay by PayPal, the PayPal prompts will come up. If you want to pay by Bitcoin, guess what? A Bitcoin conversion invoice will pop up, and it will say, from your example of, let's say, 1 Bitcoin equals 150 Canadian dollars, it'll say that you need a third of a Bitcoin, 0.333 Bitcoins. And that will prompt, and you will use your personal Bitcoin wallet, wherever you have chosen, to pay 0.33 Bitcoins. And so that's how the merchant gets the same equivalent of 50 Canadian dollars.
So as the customer, I don't really know anything about BitPay. I'm dealing with the merchant that has made an arrangement with you, and that's why it flashes up on the screen. Is that correct?
Correct.
I wouldn't know
So
BitPay.
in the broadest, correct. In the broadest sense, we are like a information technology software provider, whether it's IBM or Oracle. We are servicing the merchant as an agent for them to take Bitcoins.
Thank you. Senator Green.
Yes. Do you have any competitors?
We have many competitors.
I see.
Whether they are Bitcoin focused providers, but we also see in the competitive landscape that we are an alternative to Visa, MasterCard, American
Sure,
Express,
but
Discover,
within
PayPal.
Yes, but within Bitcoin, do you have any competitors?
Yes, if I may share, and this is all just public knowledge out there, but we have many competitors, including Coinbase, Bitnet, and they pop up almost every day, as this is an open market and many competitors dive in.
Do you offer the same services to other digital currencies?
Presently, we do not. We only provide services to back Bitcoin as a payment for our merchants. And partly is because I think you mentioned, your colleagues have mentioned the liquidity and the breadth of using digital currencies. Bitcoin, we feel, has good liquidity. The alternative currencies, time will tell.
Right. Okay, good.
Thank you, Senator Green. Mr. Bion, on behalf of the Senate Banking Committee, I'd like to express our great appreciation for your participating with us today. You've been an outstanding witness. You've been very, very helpful, and we appreciate the time you have taken to be with us. This meeting of the Banking Committee is concluded.